So if we start by simply just creating the lines from one end to the other, so there's one guitar, here's the other guitar. Bring in the things I had earlier. Usually at the gate, drive, amp, and cab. So just amp and cab, you'd have one guitar signal. So set up the other one. Again, for depth, our ones are basically pretty similar. We kind of have a standard kind of set of tones and leads and that kind of thing that we have and use, and it works, and I'm sure you do as well, and you kind of find how all that works. So whilst we're on the cabs here, I'll just explain another major point, is you will need to have these on normal resolution, not high ultra resolution. If I show you what happens if you do, put both of them up, look, our CPU jumps up to around 70%. If I run them back down to normal, down to 56%. Now there's a lot of CPU is going to be very valuable later on, so we can add more effects and all that kind of thing. So this is one of those things where you can you have to cut the corner there, but it's not a big issue again. Like live and stuff, you want your tones to be amazing as they can, but normal resolution to high, I don't know, I don't think it's going to be noticeable to you probably. But anyway, for us, I tone matched the tone and then turned them into cabs so we can both have one, and it sounds great, so no issues there. So to keep it basic like this, if you're running your guitars into the back and had the outputs set up like I showed you, it would still not be working. You would still not be running one guitar on one side, the other on the other. What we need to do, your signal would be going through both inputs, both lines here. So as I had earlier, I had these volume blocks set up at the start. So what these are doing is I'm selecting left only. Usually by default it's set to stereo. So again, just taking those two signals on the input of the XFX, taking that as a stereo signal, so it's going to send both of your guitars through this one and both through this one. So if we send it to left only, then the left input guitar will be sent through this line, the right input guitar will be going through this line, and then there's no crossover, you have completely individual lines. Okay, for the output we just need to make some adjustments as well, just so once the signal leaves the XFX, it's your separate guitar lines are separated, and then the sound guy can split you left and right, and or if you're sending them to cabs, you don't get each other's signals in each other's cabs. So if we're looking at how I've got it set up at the moment, we have one of the lines on line 2 and the other one is on line 4. 1 and 3 just left empty. Here's level 2, balance 2, level 4, balance 4. I like to just keep all the left stuff left. So this is the left input. This is the left input on the back of the XFX. This is the left output. Everything's kept left. So we will pan this to the left. Same with the right guitar. This is the right only. On the back of the XFX, this is the right hand lead. This is the right output. Everything is right. So we pan 4 to the right. So now, if you have everything set up correctly, you are good to go. So this is the end of phase 1. Basically, you can send this all directly to front of house, leave the cabs in, and you can have a personal powered monitor behind you on stage or in front of you, or you can just use the fallbacks provided at the venue, and away you go. if you want to run into power amps and onto cabs on stage and still have them mic'd up traditionally, so it's still kind of half of a traditional setup, then all you need to do is out of the output, we're using output 1, not 2. So out of output 1, instead of using the XLR outputs, we're using the lead, the 1/4 inch outputs. And left would go to one channel of the power amp, right would go to the other, or if using heads or anything else, left would go to one FX return into the cab, right would go into the other FX return into the other cab, and there you are, it's all set up. And you would use the output 1 knob on the front of the XFX to control the level. The output 2 comes in the next phase. So output 1 if we're using this setup. So if you want to add any effects, delays, reverbs, any of that kind of stuff, then we just add them in as needed. I personally like to have mine in kind of a wet, dry, wet sort of setup, parallel kind of setup. So my delay is set up above my single chain, and then the reverb below, connect them like this. So in this way the dry signal is still going straight through, and both of these are set to 100% mix. So this way, I don't know, I personally just like it because you get more control. The delays and the reverbs aren't running into each other. You can completely separate them, and it's a super kind of clear, controlled situation. At certain times I will have them in line if that's the sound I desire, but most of the time I prefer this setup, and this is also why I separate these two lines in this way, so one chain has the room to put the effects on. Now ideally you would run your cab before your effects, and so think of this like a studio setting. You would record sort of your signal dry, come out the cab, and then this would be recorded into the desk, and away you go. Then afterwards you would apply delays and reverbs to the solo or the lead or whatever was played in the door. Again, so you just have so much more control in the mix, and it's just a kind of cleaner kind of sound rather than running it through the cab also. So if you're running a DI situation, then this works great. Still comes out, goes to front of house, comes back through the monitors, everything is great. If you are running a cab, then all we do is on the front panel, which I'll switch to in a minute, is we just turn off the cab simulation. I'll show you that now. Alright, so here we just set global, then we have power amp modeling at the top, cabinet modeling underneath that. So if we set this to bypassed, even though we still have the cabs in the patch, they will be bypassed. Alright, so this way we can still leave the cabs in the patch, so if you want to jam at home through your speakers, then all you do is turn the cab simulation back on, and you can jam away on the exact same patch you use live. And then just turn it off to use the real cabs on stage. Or if you still use your cab at home, then if you wish you can just completely ignore the cab situation and let them out of the patch completely. The reason I do have my cabs run after the effects is because of the next phase, which we will enter now. Right, so this is phase 2. So we have everything set up exactly the same still if we were running phase 1. Let's say we're just running into front of house, so leave the cabs on, cab simulation is on in the global settings. So the only small change we make now is somewhere in here, I usually pop it in here, we add a fix loop here. And so we've still got our lines running here and running here. And what I do is I take a feed from here to the FX loop and from here to the FX loop. So running straight from start to finish here, this line is still going to front of house, and same with this line, and these are going out of output 1, take from the XLR outputs like I showed earlier, and that would go to the front of house for the sound guy to work with. So we still have the cab simulation on, and that's running to output 1, which is what we want because that's going to the front of house. So by taking the feeds from here to the FX loop and here to the FX loop, we are bypassing the cab simulation. So the cab simulation is still on the global settings on the front of the unit, but here we're just bypassing the cabs completely. And this is why I have my delays and stuff before the cabs, because we still keep all of that. In the manual it says to kind of replicate the whole setup and send that to the FX loop, and that's fine, but we want to run 2 guitars, which means the CPU limits would just not handle that. So this way we still keep just one block of all our delays and reverbs and other effects, and that still gets sent through our cab to front of house, and take a feed from before the cab to the FX loop. So what we want to do here, usually these would be set up, is again the same theory as the output here. We're on line 2, line 4, line 2, line 4. We want to split these up. So pan this to the left, pan this to the right. So the FX loop, this leads to output 2. If you look at output 2 on your XFX, it says FX above it. So coming out of here, this is where the leads were running into my power amp on the back of my rack, and the power amp was leading to the cabs. So of course this signal is cabless. It's coming straight out of the head and then going straight out FX 2 through my delays and reverbs, then out FX 2, output 2, sorry. And then it's going to my power amp and then to my cabs, and this is how we can run both. So output 1 goes to the front of house, output 2 goes to your power amp, to your cabs, and voila, as simple as that. We now have a much larger kind of options and setup that we can have on stage, and I've been enjoying this for quite a while now, and so is the audience. Everyone's loving how it sounds. Sound guys are telling me how much they've enjoyed mixing it because it's so easy and it sounds amazing straight off the bat. They have a leading work to do. So this is the end of phase 2. Alright, so phase 3 is the last one, and I got this idea off Meshuggah. Other people I'm sure are doing it, but I mean we're a big fan of them, and I saw them doing this with their XFX, so I thought I'd give it a go, worked it all out, and on paper it works, so I'd give it a try. So what I did was we add another volume block at the end of each line, but instead we set these back to 0. So at the moment both guitars would be running straight down the middle again. They would not be separated, but the separation we are doing is through these. So the input select doesn't really matter because that's already been done at the start of the chain. So what does matter is usually these would be set left or right, which kind of creates the center anyway. So what we want to do is, again, on the top line everything is left, so we set it all to left. On the bottom would be like this, but again it's right, turning everything to right. So now if you're running down these lines coming straight through, this would be pan to the right, this would be pan to the left, and we no longer need to do it here because we're sort of pre-doing it here. So what this means is that we can, in say another scene, turn these off, so now both lines here would just go straight through and they would not be panned left or right, they would be centered. There's a bypass now. So that brings both into the center. But that gets a little bit crowded if one was playing a lead, say this one was playing rhythm. It still sounds a little bit weird straight down the center. So what I added was an enhancer block. You can do the same thing with a delay if you set it like a dual delay, say the left side to 0 milliseconds, the right side to like 10-15 milliseconds. You get a slight bit of difference and make the guitar sound nice and wide if you have the mix on 100. So it takes out the center, kind of splits it left and right. But delays are, again, CPU hungry and take up valuable space. So I came across this by accident one day, wondering what it was, basically, the enhance block. And it's basically the same thing, just make sure you set it to classic, not modern. Modern does a similar sort of spread effect, but it's not quite as dramatic as the classic, which is kind of what we want. So the enhance block does kind of what the delay thing would do. It literally just kind of separates it left to right and kind of takes out that center field as such. It gives it that width. So obviously the more you increase it, the wider it sounds. Now these settings I've kind of landed on for now. They may change in the future once I actually get to test it on a proper PA. At the moment it's just in my home monitors. But I bought these, the left and right here, in a bit, just because it was losing a bit of bass and a bit of the meat and stuff, just because it was getting spread so far wide. And I don't know, I just messed around with them and these kind of felt right. So in the mix and stuff, you'll hear it in a minute anyway, but it just felt good. So this is where they're at for now. Yeah, so for example, scene 1 for all of our patches is always just rhythm tones for both of us. So delay reverbs are off, there's no extra effects, gates are on, tight rhythms, tube, screamer, amp, cab, that's it. Scene 2 is usually kind of a lead one, maybe like for Colour Man it's the main intro lead. So the bottom guitar stays exactly the same because it's still just on rhythm. It is on rhythm as the whole song. And the top one goes to the lead, so gate comes off, so it's a bit more free. I've got the drive settings changed slightly compared to the X side, so go to the Y drive, and it gives a bit more character, or a different character. The settings I changed. Delay and reverb now come on. Cab's always the same, but as we can see, the volume blocks at the end here have come off. So now this is going straight through. It's still centered here. This is coming straight through. It's still centered here. But with the enhanced block, the rhythm track gets spread wide. So the lead's straight down the middle, rhythm track's wide. Again, I got the demo in a minute. And as we go on, number 4 is my solo patch. Exactly the same setup, but the delay and reverbs go to the X setting. Again, just different times, the different mix settings. The amp goes to a Y, which is the same amp, just again different settings for a slightly different tone. Bring back to 1, these are rhythm tones again, and again spread left and right. So the only other kind of little things just to mess around with is like with the levels here. I just had to adjust these a little bit, reduce them by 2.5 dB and bring this up by about 3, just so when you're going between them being split left and right and then coming down the middle, there wasn't a jump or decrease in volume of anything. You don't want every time you use this cool new feature, you don't want it to blast the PA or get drowned in the mix somehow. You want it to be consistent. So there's the only thing I played with. And I think that's about it. I mean, the only other things I had in here, for bring the patch back to fully original, was just some EQ, basic, just high pass, low pass, a little bit of a notch of a, annoying frequency there. This one on Jay's guitar. The reason this one's before the cab and this one's after was just, and with this line going to a real cab on stage, Jay's guitar was still quite, I don't know, boomy and that kind of thing, so I just put it there so it affects the real cab as well. Mine set quite nicely, and I don't know, it's just the way it worked out. Also had one here. I got like a radio kind of effect. And there it comes on there at the start of the song. And I also had a pitch here, which is for my solo, which I control with my expression pedal, set to external 1. And that's it. So we got to the end. Alright, so last thing as well, just another little tip, I guess. I like to, in my general tones, with like, you know, just one guitar, just me, I like using 2 gates, both with kind of lower threshold settings, and then they kind of work together, with one before and one after the tube screamer, both before the amp. And I don't know, just having the lower threshold settings, still having them quite tight, just seems a bit more natural as well. Otherwise you have to have one gate set quite high, and I don't know, like you sort of lose the sustain and all that kind of thing. So you're having 2 and just kind of moderating between them, you kind of get the best of the sustain and also the tightness that you need. So what I'm doing here, because there's only 2 available, is we've both got one here, but I'm also just setting the gate and the input gate stage. And again, I just sort of sat there, sort of set one, played around with it, set the other, and just kind of got them to a point where it's fine, and these settings work great for us. Any long sustained chords that we need to hold, they hold, and really super tight sections are super tight. Alright guys, thanks for watching my video. I hope this has helped a lot. If you have any further questions, feel free to chuck them in the comment section below. And please check out my bands if you have some time. I've got links in the description below for them. Desper's got a new album coming out. We have a teaser up if you want to have a listen to that. And yeah, thanks again. Hopefully see you at a show on tour sometime. Cheers.